It started with a name. Not a shout. Not a fight. Not even a raised voice. Just a name. And the refusal to write it down. Vanessa Clark stood at the check-in desk of Terminal 3's elite VIP Summit Lounge. Early morning light gleamed off her steel gray carry-on. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she stopped at the desk. Calm. Focused. Clean navy suit, hair pulled into a perfect coil, not a speck of lint on her lapel. She offered her ID, her reservation QR, and a practiced smile to the young assistant behind the desk. The girl barely looked up. Name, she asked, glancing at the screen, fingers ready. I believe you already have it, Vanessa said. Clark. Vanessa. Executive level access. I'm on the 7:40 a.m. to Chicago. A second passed. The assistant, blonde, early 20s, let her eyes flicker over the screen. Her fingers paused. Then resumed. I'm sorry, she said tightly. You're not listed for the lounge. Vanessa's smile didn't waver. I believe I am. The assistant turned her screen slightly, not enough for Vanessa to see it but enough to imply transparency. It says here the only executive upgrade today is under a Mr. Ethan Maxwell. If you're not him. Vanessa's eyebrow ticked upward. I'm not. A silence. I'm Summit Group's Executive Strategy Chair, Vanessa continued, still polite, still measured. 41% ownership stake. And unless something's gone drastically wrong, I absolutely do have access to this lounge. Behind her, the terminal murmured with the rustle of boarding announcements and rolling luggage. A man coughed. A toddler shrieked. But here, at the gate, it was frozen. The assistant stiffened. One moment. She walked toward the side office, high heels wobbling slightly now, and returned with a man in a Summit blazer, Greg, the lounge manager. Late 50s, sun-weathered skin, wedding ring but no tan line beneath it. He looked at Vanessa, then at the assistant, then back at Vanessa. What's the problem here? She says she's an executive shareholder, the assistant muttered. Greg nodded toward Vanessa's ID, still resting on the counter. He picked it up, looked it over. Then handed it back without comment. I'm going to need you to step aside, ma'am, he said, motioning toward a rope cordon off to the right. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me? We have other guests coming through, Greg said, already waving toward a man approaching from behind. If you'd like to wait over there, we'll sort this out as soon as we can. The man walking up was white, late 30s, in a three-piece suit. His boarding pass was barely out of his pocket before Greg greeted him with a broad smile. Mr. Maxwell. Welcome back, sir. Right this way. Maxwell didn't look at Vanessa. Not once. Just brushed past her and followed Greg inside. Vanessa stayed still. The assistant glanced at her, eyes narrowing just a bit, as if to say, told you so. And that's when Vanessa reached into her bag. She didn't say a word. She pulled out a sleek, matte black wallet and removed a single card. No logo. No color. Just engraved platinum on black. V. Clark. Titan Group, Summit Enterprise Holdings. Executive shareholder, level I clearance. The assistant's breath caught. Vanessa tapped the card lightly against the marble desk. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to ask me one of 3 things, she said. Would you like to know what those 3 are? The girl swallowed. 1. Vanessa said calmly, holding up a finger, you could ask me to verify my reservation. 2. You could ask me to reskin my clearance. Or 3. You could apologize for dismissing me in front of 25 people without doing either. Behind her, someone stopped rolling their luggage. 2 other women in business attire had paused their check-in, now watching. Vanessa took a breath. I will not wait again. I will not be escorted off. And I will not, repeat, will not, watch another uniformed employee give my seat to someone who didn't earn it. The assistant's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but Greg reappeared at her side. Ma'am, he said firmly. If you don't lower your voice and step away from the counter, I will call security. Vanessa turned to him slowly. Please do. Greg blinked. What? I insist, she said. Call security. Call whoever you need to. But do it quickly. You have about 5 minutes before this becomes very uncomfortable for you. Greg scoffed. Is that a threat? Vanessa finally smiled. And it wasn't warm. It's a promise. Behind the glass of the VIP lounge, Ethan Maxwell sipped champagne, unaware. The assistant was now typing furiously into the system, her fingers trembling. Vanessa tapped her card again. Still waiting. Greg leaned closer, clearly agitated. Listen. I don't care who you say you are. That seat is not yours. Vanessa slowly leaned forward, her voice dropping into lethal calm. That seat has my initials sewn into the headrest. Greg's mouth opened, but before he could speak, 3 uniformed officers appeared at the top of the concourse. They weren't airport police. They wore the navy blue of Summit Corporate Internal Affairs. One of them held a tablet. Another carried a sealed envelope. And all 3 were walking straight toward the counter. Vanessa turned to Greg. 5 minutes are up. Greg didn't move at first. Not when the Summit Internal Affairs officers reached the counter. Not when they showed him the credentials. Not even when the lead officer, a tall black woman with a crisp bob and an even crisper badge, calmly said, Gregory Tannenbaum, you're being placed under immediate internal review pending dismissal. What the hell is this? He barked, puffing up like a cornered animal. The officer's expression didn't shift. We received a direct escalation from executive-level shareholder V. Clark regarding a discriminatory incident involving personnel misconduct. She turned her tablet slightly. There, in sharp, clean footage, was a still from less than 5 minutes ago, Greg, mid-sneer, blocking Vanessa from the lounge door. Behind him, Maxwell strolled in like royalty. Another angle showed the assistant recoiling at Vanessa's card. This is a misunderstanding, Greg said, his voice rising. She's not, she never said who she was. There's no way we could have known. The officer looked to Vanessa, who hadn't moved. Her arms were folded. Her face was calm. Ms. Clark, the officer said, do you confirm this report and wish to proceed? Vanessa nodded once. Effective immediately, the officer continued, you are relieved of your position. Your badge and access credentials, please. Greg sputtered, you can't just. The second officer stepped forward. You are not authorized to operate any system, approach any guest, or enter restricted areas under Summit jurisdiction. Do you understand? His voice caught in his throat. People were filming now. Quietly. Passengers, employees, even another lounge staffer by the coffee station, phone angled low. The internet was hungry for moments like this, and Greg had just served himself up on a platinum tray. You can't fire me in front of customers, he shouted, finally. That's illegal. You need process. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her tone silken. No, Greg. You need manners. He froze. She continued. Process is for disagreements. This was bias. And bias, when it damages shareholder property, is cause for immediate dismissal. I didn't invent the policy. You did. 4 years ago. I just added teeth. Greg turned beet red. The assistant was now hyperventilating slightly behind the desk, fingers no longer touching the keyboard. The officer turned to her next. You are also being placed on probation pending investigation, she said. Please hand over your badge and access card. The girl didn't argue. Her mouth opened. Then closed. She unpinned the name badge and laid it down like a dropped confession. I didn't mean to. You didn't think, Vanessa interrupted. That's the root of all discrimination. You assumed. And when the evidence disagreed, you chose comfort over correction. The girl looked like she might cry. She reached out slightly. I'm sorry, Miss Clark. I didn't mean. But Vanessa wasn't cruel. She wasn't cold, either. She simply said, then don't do it again. Somewhere else. And turned back toward the lounge entrance. Behind her, the internal affairs officers guided Greg and the assistant off the premises. No shouting. No struggle. Just the quiet echo of boots and broken careers. Inside the lounge, Maxwell was finally looking up from his seat, frowning as he noticed people filming through the glass. He got up, walked toward the doors, then froze when he spotted Vanessa stepping in, this time, unblocked. The staff inside opened the doors for her like royalty. Maxwell moved to intercept her. I think there's been a mistake, he began. They said. She walked right past him. No eye contact. No energy wasted. She took her seat in the first-class waiting section, where a fresh cappuccino and hot towel already awaited. 2 minutes later, a lounge server gently approached her. Miss Clark, she said, voice trembling slightly, would you like anything else while you wait for boarding? Vanessa didn't even look up from her tablet. Yes, she said. The server blinked. Anything specific? Vanessa finally smiled. A faint curl of amusement at the edge of her lips. An apology, from Summit Airlines corporate PR. In writing. The server nodded, face turning pale. I'll contact HQ. You do that. And then she returned to her work like the entire morning had been nothing more than a missed calendar invite. The lounge door closed softly behind her. Vanessa sank into her seat, her jaw tight, eyes fixed on the sleek screen of her tablet. Around her, silence wrapped the VIP room like cotton, faint jazz humming through the air vents, the aroma of roasted coffee and cedarwood diffusers masking the tension that had just unraveled at the gate. But she wasn't relaxed. She wasn't relieved. Because Vanessa Clark wasn't just dealing with 2 bad employees. This wasn't new. This wasn't rare. This was expected. And that was the real problem. She pulled up her encrypted inbox. The subject line was already there. Project Atlas, activation trigger confirmed, Gate 3B footage live. She tapped it once. A private stream opened, multiple angles from security feeds, phones, even a discreet lapel cam worn by a consultant in plain sight just 3 feet from the lounge doors. The entire altercation with Greg and the assistant? It had been filmed. By Vanessa's team. With her permission. Because this wasn't the first incident of its kind. Not even the 5th. For 6 months, Vanessa's internal strategy unit had been quietly tracking service patterns across Summit Airlines' top-tier lounges. She wasn't just the chair of strategy. She was the architect of the company's equity framework, launched publicly, praised widely, but poisoned quietly. Too many shareholders had whispered their doubts behind closed doors. Too many emails had contained the phrase, maybe the real issue is guest expectations. And too many frontline managers had been promoted without ever learning the basic tenets of humility. So Vanessa had done something no one saw coming. She turned herself into the test. Her team booked her anonymously, under different variations of her name, V. Clark. Vanessa E. Clark. E. Vanessa Clark. They wanted to see what happened when she wasn't a press release. When she wasn't a name on the quarterly call. When she was just a passenger, black, poised, and confident, but with no obvious power on her name tag. And now? Now, they had proof. Not theory. Not speculation. Hard footage. Patterns. Data. She'd just been denied access to a lounge that carried her initials on its founding charter, and someone gave her seat to a man who'd bought his shares a year ago, for clout. Maxwell. She glanced back toward the lounge entrance. He was still standing by the buffet table, clearly rattled now. A staff member whispered something to him. He nodded, then started toward her. Miss Clark, he said carefully, stopping a few feet from her. She didn't look up. I just wanted to say. I didn't know. I was just handed the keycard. They said my name was on the list. If I'd known. She raised a single hand. Not a stop. Not a threat. Just, enough. He froze. Do you know how many times I've heard that today? She asked without turning her gaze from the tablet. Ma'am, I'm just saying. Ethan, she said, now looking up at last, do you remember what you posted on LinkedIn last quarter? He blinked. I don't. You wrote, we need more women in leadership, but the right kind. Not the loud ones who cry racism every time things don't go their way. Silence. He turned pale. How do I know? She continued, not blinking. Because a recruiter screenshot it and sent it to me. Said you'd be a culture risk for executive mobility. He staggered slightly backward. I didn't mean it that way. But you said it, she replied. And now you're in the middle of a corporate scandal about racial and gender bias. On the same airline whose equity charter you signed. How does that feel? Ethan didn't answer. He turned and walked out of the lounge. Vanessa didn't watch him go. Instead, she opened her encrypted chat. Typed 2 words. Release Atlas. Moments later, her phone buzzed. A Twitter post had gone live. Footage of the gate confrontation. Subtitled. Clean audio. No dramatic music. Just facts, reactions, and faces. Within 17 minutes, it passed 1 million views. Hashtag that seat was taken started trending globally. By noon, a national anchor had stitched the footage into a segment titled, When Owning the Company Isn't Enough, What Black Women Still Face in Power. That afternoon, Summit's chief legal officer called her in a panic. This will crush our PR, he said. Can we put out a joint statement? Clarify things? Vanessa's response was measured. Calm. A slow sip of lemon water before she spoke. I don't want clarification, she said. I want correction. And then came the twist. Because what no one outside her circle knew, not Greg, not Sharon, not even the Summit board, was that Vanessa had already prepared her next move. She'd booked a second incident. At a different airport. In a different city. With a different name. And a second undercover operator, this time a retired veteran, black, wheelchair-bound, wearing a discreet camera, holding her executive access card. That incident happened 3 hours ago. Same result. Denied. Ignored. Replaced. And it was also filmed. Vanessa now had a series. A pattern. A case study ready for regulators, shareholders, and the Department of Transportation. Not a moment. A movement. The next morning, Vanessa Clark wasn't at the airport. She was in a glass-paneled boardroom, 29 stories above downtown Atlanta. The Summit Enterprises Emergency Board meeting had been called at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every C-level executive had been summoned. Attendance wasn't optional. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, not just in title, but in truth. The room was quiet, save for the faint buzz of someone nervously clicking a pen. On the wall, a still frame of the incident, Vanessa standing firm at the gate, Greg gesturing, the assistant frozen, glowed from the projection screen. The general counsel cleared his throat. This has now reached over 38 million views across platforms, he said. 17 major media outlets have picked it up. Summit is trending alongside tags like hashtag systemic bias and hashtag that seat was taken. We've received over 2,300 formal complaints, many citing similar behavior from staff in other cities. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. So we're not dealing with an isolated incident, she said. No, ma'am. The CFO spoke up next, his voice carefully neutral. Vanessa, while no one here is excusing what happened, the board would appreciate it if we could discuss a solution that doesn't involve a total public reckoning. Shareholders are nervous. If this spirals, so does our stock. Vanessa turned her eyes toward him, steady, unwavering. Are shareholders nervous because their airline humiliated a black woman executive in broad daylight? He shifted uncomfortably. They're nervous because it was you. And if it had been a woman without the card? Without the title? Would we be sitting here, or would we be issuing another empty training memo? Silence. Vanessa rose from her chair. She walked slowly to the projection screen and tapped her tablet. The screen changed. New footage appeared. A frail black veteran at a different airport, holding a Summit priority pass. Denied entry to the priority line. Ignored. Then, a woman in a job. Same denial. Then, a mixed-race couple in first class asked to move to accommodate a late upgrade. None of them raised their voices. None of them got their seats back. Vanessa tapped the screen again. This is your systemic problem. And my plan begins with acknowledging that Summit has failed at the ground level. The chief HR officer finally spoke up. You're proposing a public admission? I'm proposing a reformation. She turned and walked back to her seat. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the tone now, coiled power earned from years of having to explain things that others took for granted. Effective immediately, we are launching Project Atlas to overhaul our frontline training, reporting, and retention systems. Every manager, every regional director, and every guest services employee will undergo bias resilience training, not just DEI fluff, but actual accountability and escalation protocol. She paused. And those who resist will be replaced. Another silence. But this one was different. Heavier. No one looked away. Vanessa continued, Summit markets itself as a first-class airline. That includes how it treats people before they sit down. I won't allow this brand to stand for white glove service to the privileged, and suspicion for the rest. The CEO, David North, silver-haired, polished, watching carefully, leaned forward. And what do you want from us, Vanessa? She met his gaze without blinking. I don't want anything, she said. I've already implemented it. He arched an eyebrow. Excuse me? I submitted the executive order last night under Article 7.12 of the Shareholder Charter. Emergency policy activation only requires 41% equity backing. You all signed it in 2019. She waited. David glanced toward the general counsel, who confirmed it with a nod, face pale. She had outplayed them. Legally. Strategically. Decisively. But she wasn't finished. I'll be making a public statement at noon. The footage from the second incident, the veteran, goes live 15 minutes before. You have until then to decide whether you want to stand beside me when I do it. One by one, the executives looked around the room. Some nodded. Some swallowed hard. One or two finally understood. She had given them the chance to walk with her when she could have let them fall behind. Later that day, 11:58 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Atlanta. Washington, D.C., London. Nairobi. The screens lit up. Phones buzzed. News banners read. Summit Airlines issues apology after Black CEO denied entry to lounge. Vanessa Clark speaks out after viral discrimination moment. Systemic bias or isolated slip? Millions tune in as Clark speaks live. Vanessa stood at the podium, cameras flashing, press crowded tight. She took a deep breath. No teleprompter. No PR flax. Just her voice. Yesterday, I was told I didn't belong in a seat with my name on it. Pause. But the problem isn't just my name. The problem is the number of people who are told every day, in airports, in banks, in boardrooms, that their presence is a mistake. That their skin, their accent, their hairstyle, their clothes make them less credible, less eligible, less worthy. She looked into the cameras. So let me be clear, Summit Airlines is changing. Because I am changing it. Not with tweets. Not with slogans. But with policy. With enforcement. With power. Another pause. Real equity doesn't wait until the moment goes viral. Vanessa stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause, not because it was loud, but because it was unified. You could hear it in the silence that followed. The kind where people are afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to miss a single word that might still linger in the air. She didn't smile as she left the stage. She didn't wave. She just walked, measured, confident, forward. In the press room behind the curtain, aides scrambled. Screens blinked with live feeds from multiple networks. Hashtags exploded again. Hashtag the seat was never empty. Hashtag Vanessa Clark. Hashtag boardroom power. Her phone buzzed once. A simple message from the Summit Airlines CEO. You've redefined how this company leads. Let's rebuild together. But it wasn't victory that filled Vanessa's chest. It was something quieter. Heavier. She stepped into the green room and sat down, finally alone. That's when Thomas, her longtime driver, entered. Not a bodyguard. Not a corporate shadow. Just a man who had driven her to every critical meeting since the day she started at Summit. He stood awkwardly at the door, hat in hand. "Ms. Clark," he asked. "You good?" She looked up, caught off guard for once by the simplicity of the question. "I'm getting there." He nodded, smiled faintly, then said something that caught her by surprise. "You know what I saw when I watched that video?" She raised an eyebrow. "I saw you not flinch. Not once. And I thought, damn. That woman walks into a room like she owns it. Because she does. But I also thought, how many times did she have to bite her tongue before she earned the right to open her mouth like that?" Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. They both knew the answer. Too many. He continued, "My niece saw it. Said she wants to be like you now. Not a celebrity. Not a CEO. Just unshakable." That hit deeper than applause. That hit where no shareholder vote could reach. Vanessa stood slowly, her voice quiet. "Tell your niece she already is." Thomas tipped his head, emotion tightening his throat. And then he left, leaving her to absorb the moment. Airplane departure later that week. Vanessa boarded a flight. No announcement. No press. Just her, a carry-on, and the sound of boarding calls echoing overhead. She didn't use the VIP line. She didn't need to. At the gate, the young attendant looked up and froze slightly. Recognition flashed behind her eyes. But instead of panicking, the woman smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Clark," she said, voice clear. "We've been expecting you." Vanessa nodded once. The boarding doors opened. And she stepped onto the aircraft, not as someone finally allowed to enter, but as someone who never needed permission in the first place. Because the seat wasn't granted. It was earned. It was owned. It was always hers. And now it was a symbol. A reminder. And now I want to speak directly to you, wherever you're watching this. Maybe it's on the train. Maybe it's late at night. Maybe you've lived this story, or feared that one day, it could be yours. Have you ever walked into a room and felt unwelcome before you even said a word? Have you ever had to prove who you are, not because of what you did, but because of how you look? If you have, then know this. Silence is no longer your only option. Speak. Stand. Push back. Because what I did that day wasn't magic. It was muscle. Muscle built from years of swallowing disrespect and choosing strategy over shouting. You don't need to be a billionaire to change things. You just need the courage to make the first move. Cut to black. Then one final line, centered in silence. The seat was never empty. It was waiting for you.